Welcome to the Jonathan and Rebecca Bailey House in Whittier, California. Today happens to be Sunday, September the 14th, 2025. I'm Howard Paul Short. I've got Tracy with me. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
Great to be here.
Good. Yes.
Yeah, so tell me about this wonderful place.
All right. We were going to start in the backyard of the Bailey house, and there's a few kind of unique things to see here in the backyard. The first is thing that kind of looks like a barbecue, but actually is not. This is just a cover, and it's covering our cistern. And of course, the cistern holds water. It's a little bit different than a well, and then it has a solid bottom. So water had to be added to the cistern, and this is what they would use for their household water. Originally, there was a stream running down at the bottom of the property that was drainage from Turnbull Canyon, and in the winter they would put pipes up the stream and then run them over to the cistern here and fill it up all the way to the top with water. And it's actually quite deep. It's about 10 to 12 feet deep, and it's shaped like a bell, so it's narrower at the top than it is at the bottom.
Okay.
So that was their source of water. If they happened to run out in the summertime, they would take their wagon down to the San Gabriel River and fill up barrels of water from the river. Okay, the next thing I want to show you is over here. And you can see our very large stump here. There was a eucalyptus tree there, very, very old. We had to cut it down a few years ago because the tree was starting to die. But the interesting thing is still in the stump. Now, if you can, you might see this metal post sticking out of the tree, kind of near the base there. Yeah, you see it? Okay. To prove to you how old this tree is, I will tell you that metal pole is a brake handle from a horse-drawn wagon. So, at some point when the tree was little, maybe it was used to tie up the tree so it would stand up straight. We don't really know how the brake handle got there, but eucalyptus trees grow very fast, and it grew right around that brake handle. Alrighty, now we're going to head back, and I'm going to show you the root cellar and the barn. Now, root cellars are pretty unusual for Southern California, but since this is a very old house, originally built a little bit after the Civil War, we have a root cellar because there was no electricity, no refrigeration. The root cellar was used to keep their food cooler in the summer, being underground. It also would have kept it warmer in the winter if we had cold winters, which of course we don't. No snow here in Southern California.
That's right.
But you can see it's a small root cellar. One day, Rebecca was down around the corner where it's difficult to see from here, and she was arranging her jars on the shelf, and Jonathan came along, and he didn't see her, and he shut the door and he locked it, and he went into town to meet with some friends. Poor Rebecca was down there in the dark all afternoon, and you can imagine she was probably a little peeved by the time he returned. And it was said that he was not seen in town for the next week.
Oh my goodness.
I don't know, he was put on, he was grounded, I think, essentially. All right, now moving on to the barn, which is attached to the root cellar. This is a typical old barn. They would have had horses or some kind of buggy in this barn. What we have here now is a heavy-duty work wagon, which is from Whittier, the early days of Whittier. But this particular wagon did not belong to the Baileys. This was down at a sawmill down near the intersection of Philadelphia and Whittier Boulevard. So we have some tools in here that were used during the time. Of course, all the tools then were hand powered for the most part. This is my favorite. This is a hand powered drill. You don't see the drill bit here, that's missing, but if it was there, you would just be making your hole.
Look at that.
And the interesting thing about this is you can rest this part of the drill against many different parts of your body. It could even be on your forehead if you're drilling overhead. You could use it on your knee, on your stomach, on your chest.
Huh.
It's kind of interesting. All right. Now, we're going to go around this side of the house. Originally, when the house was built, which was about 1868, it was a smaller house, and we'll see that as we go in and see which rooms were added on. But originally there was a sleeping loft up here in the attic, and there was originally a window there. And I also want you to remember this location right next to the house here. When we get inside the house, I'm going to show you a photograph of the house, and we'll be talking about this area of the house. Okay, we're still waiting for the other tour. Do you want to put it on pause, or? All right, welcome to the Bailey House. This is the oldest house in the city of Whittier, and it actually predates the formation of the city. It was built in 1868 by a German immigrant by the name of Jacob Gherkin, and he came to settle this piece of property as part of the Homestead Act. So he built a little house here, and he was a farmer and also a sheep rancher. All right, about 20 years later in 1887, a group of Quakers from the Midwest was looking all around Southern California for the perfect place to found a Quaker city. So of course they picked our spot here. Originally it was about 1,300 acres, and this was the only house on that piece of property. Hence we call it the first house in the city of Whittier. So they moved in May 1887, Jonathan and Rebecca Bailey. He was about 68 years old, and she was a couple years younger, about 66 years old. That's pretty old to be starting a city from scratch. But they were originally from Ohio. They spent their whole adult lives there. They raised their family there. And then later on, when they were in their 60s, they retired out here to Southern California. And they had lived actually in downtown LA before they moved here to the Bailey House. So they moved in here in May 1887. There was nothing here, so they had to hold the first church services right here on the porch. And this is a replica bench of the bench that they sat on in 1887, had their church services. They still have the original bench at the First Friends Church in Uptown Whittier. All right, we are now in the living room of the Bailey House, and you can see here we have a very nice portrait of Jonathan Bailey. He's got this nice Quaker beard that you can see there. That's very common of men of his age. He used to do something interesting with his beard. He would sit here on his rocking chair. This is his rocking chair. He would invite one of his grandkids to sit on his lap, and he would hide pennies in his beard and in his hair. So the grandkids would go on a penny hunt. And of course, I was just showing you the types of pennies they had back in those days, and it was the Indian head penny.
They're nice.
So, what could you do with 3 or 4 pennies that you found in Grandpa Jonathan's beard? Today, of course, literally nothing. But back in those days, you could take your 4 cents and run down to Greenleaf to one of the general stores and buy a handful of candy with that. So it would be well worth your time. All right, we are going to go into the dining room next, where we have a couple of old photos that I like to share with people. This is the very oldest photo of the Bailey House that we have, and it was taken in May 1887, just as they were moving in. It's hard to see here, but Jonathan and Rebecca are on the porch, and some other family and friends are around them. You can see them a lot better in this lower picture, which was taken a few years later in the early 1890s. There's Jonathan and there's Rebecca.
There they are. And the dog.
Yes, of course the dog. The dog was actually very useful. Today, as in 1887, if there was a good rain year, the Whittier Hills in back of us were covered with mustard. And that mustard could grow to above your head. So they actually used to send out the dog when the grandkids were lost up in the mustard in the hills. Okay, now turning around to the opposite wall here, we have this great photo here that was taken in 1892, and there's this huge crowd of people there in front of the Bailey House. Here's the Bailey House right here. The occasion was their 50th wedding anniversary. Jonathan and Rebecca, and the two of them are right here in front. So they had invited pretty much every Quaker in town to their wedding anniversary. It was such an important date for the city of Whittier that they even called a holiday from school. So you will see all kinds of kids in the crowd, and Uncle Jonathan, as he was known, gave every child a little bag of candy on that day.
Very nice.
Everyone in the crowd here chipped in some money to buy them a nice gift, and we still have parts of the gift. It was a set of china imported from Limoges, France, and we have a plate here. It's a nice flower pattern. And we also have a covered dish in the cupboard here.
Oh, isn't that nice?
So the lady who donated this dish, her name is Lois Joyce. She was one of their great-granddaughters, and she helped us, along with another great-granddaughter, when the house was restored in the early 1970s. That's when we turned this house from a place of residence into a museum. And of course, this year we're celebrating our 50th anniversary. We originally opened in 1975. Okay, so during the restoration in the early 1970s, they repainted and re-wallpapered the entire house. In this particular room, when they got down to the last level, last piece of wallpaper, this is what it was. So we think that's probably what the Baileys had in 1887, and that is a nice piece of hand-painted wallpaper.
Was that velvet at all in there, or no velvet?
I don't think it's velvet.
Okay.
It does look velvety.
It does.
So
I thought it was.
You can see how well this hand-painted wallpaper held up compared to the 1970s wallpaper on the wall. Yeah, and we're due to re-wallpaper this.
It was different for sure. Okay.
Over here we have some family photos. The Baileys had 2 sons and 1 daughter, and eventually all of them came to live here in Southern California or in Whittier. The whole family originally was from Ohio. Alrighty, going back into the living room now. Oh, thanks.
Sorry about that.
Thanks, Elma. Okay, now I want to point out to you some things that actually belong to Jonathan and Rebecca Bailey. Most of the pieces of furniture in the house are period from the late 1800s, early 1900s. And almost everything in the house was donated by residents who live here in Whittier. We do have some things that belong to them. We have, as I mentioned earlier, his rocking chair. This is also his cane. And behind you there is her rocking chair. And you can see how much smaller that rocking chair is than his. It's a good demonstration of their difference in height. He was very tall for the time, about 6'3", and she was probably about 5 foot tall. The other nice piece of furniture in this room that belonged to the Baileys was this corner cabinet here. This originally belonged to Jonathan's father, and this piece was actually constructed shortly after the Revolutionary War. So it's a super old piece. And it went with the Bailey family from Virginia to Ohio to Los Angeles to Whittier. And it was donated by Lois Joyce. All right. Another interesting thing. Whoa, we're good. Another interesting thing in this room is our fireplace. And this is not a wood-burning fireplace, but a coal-burning fireplace. And you might notice that it's very shallow here. It's not deep like a regular wood fireplace would be. And of course, coal burns much differently than wood, and that's why it is just very shallow. When the Baileys first moved here, there were very few trees in the area, which is it's a little hard to wrap your mind around, because today there's so many trees in Southern California. But there was not enough trees to generate a good supply of firewood, but they could go to any train station and fill up their wagon with coal, since all the trains had coal-burning engines. Now, here we have another nice Quaker man. He has the same kind of beard that Jonathan did, and this is our city's namesake, John Greenleaf Whittier. He was very famous at that time, both as an abolitionist. He was very active during the Civil War to try and gain the rights of the slaves, and he was a famous poet. You can still read his poetry today. And the city fathers, including Jonathan, they wrote a letter to him asking if they could name the city after him. And he wrote back a very nice letter, which is in the archives of Whittier College, basically saying, yes, you could. He even wrote a little poem for us. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but the title of the poem is "My Name I Give to Thee." And that was very typical of the Quakers, with the these, thys, and the thous. If you've ever seen the movie Friendly Persuasion, you will hear a lot of these, thys, and thous. This photo right here shows a man and a woman. This is Iva Honeycutt and her husband George Honeycutt. Iva was a granddaughter of the Baileys, and she lived here the longest of any of the Bailey descendants. She lived here from about 1928 until she died in 1964. Alrighty, now the last piece of interesting furniture in this room is what we call the Lincoln Cabinet. And this reportedly was in Abraham Lincoln's law office when he was a young lawyer just starting out in Springfield, Illinois. You can see it is kind of a lawyer's bookcase with the nice glass doors. And it was sold a few times, eventually made its way to Whittier. And when the owner, a Mrs. Harvey, died, when she passed away, she had willed this to the Bailey House. Very appropriate. Because of Abraham Lincoln efforts, of course, to free the slaves, which was along the lines of what the Quakers also wanted. Okay, I think we are ready to head to the next room. All right, you can see the flooring changes here from the wide redwood planks to the narrow oak planks. And that is one sign that this room was added on. Another really good way to tell is to look at the wall here. And you can see the offset boards. This was originally part of the porch. So the nice porch out in front, originally in 1868, wrapped all the way around the house. And little by little, they enclosed portions of the porch to make more rooms. Alrighty, we have one of Rebecca's bonnets here. She would never be caught dead leaving the house without her black Quaker bonnet. Now, the other impressive thing in this room is this nice Victorian bed, which belonged to Iva Honeycutt. And on the bed is a quilt that was made by Rebecca Bailey, we believe in the early 1840s. Despite its modern look, you could swear this is from the 1960s, but if you look carefully at the quilt, you will see that every one of these tiny little squares is hand sewn. So she was really an excellent seamstress. And then after the quilt, all the little squares of the quilt were made, then she put the flowers on top. And that type of quilt is called an applique quilt.
And this quilt has lasted a long time.
Yes, it has been passed through the generations of Quakers since Jonathan and Rebecca, and their descendants took very good care of it. And the last descendant to have it decided that it needed to be back at the Bailey house, and it was donated back to the house. So that was really a special thing for us to get. Alrighty, now we talked a little bit about wallpaper before. The people who were restoring the house also collected some other pieces of wallpaper that were in various rooms of the house, and you can see it all kind of looks nice and floral. Rebecca loved flowers, so that's no mystery there. And this is all, I guess you would consider it late Victorian age. This nice nightstand also belonged to Iva Honeycutt. So these two items were in this room for many decades. This is an interesting piece here. This is called a hair receiver, and that's why it's sitting on the bedside table. But, back then people were very good at reusing and recycling things. So she would take the hair out of her brush and comb, stuff it in here, and eventually she would use it for something. It could be something as simple as stuffing on a pincushion, or it could be a work of art. I don't know if you've ever seen artwork made out of hair, but it does exist. I wish we had a piece here. This is one of my favorite photos here. This is an old newspaper photo, but this is Painter Avenue, one of the main streets in Uptown Whittier. Before, of course, it was even paved, and you can see it's just a little dirt road with a cow on it, and you can only see a few houses there. The Bailey house, if you could see it, would be behind this line of trees here. And here's another nice picture of Jonathan on his horse, Polly.
The horse's name was Polly?
Yes.
That's cute.
Jonathan was actually the president of the company that developed the city of Whittier. It was called the Pickering Land and Water Company. And since he was president, that might explain why he was the one that got to move into the only house on the property. But one of his jobs was to supervise getting the land surveyed into plots so that they could be sold off. And there was quite a real estate bubble in the year 1887. So when they first started selling plots in May 1887, people were lined up around the block in downtown LA to buy plots of land here in Whittier. And then by the end of the year, the market crashed totally, the real estate market. So then Whittier had some very hard years, maybe even like a hard decade before they came back. All right, we're gonna go now into the bathroom. All right. The only thing in the bathroom that was here when the Baileys lived here was this bathtub. But you couldn't turn on the faucets to let the water in because they didn't have running water piped into the house at that time. So they would just have to fill up with water heated on the stove and mix it with cold water. It was a lot of trouble. They did have a drain that drained the bathtub that went out to their garden, so they would reuse that water in the backyard. Another good example of their recycling. This little corner sink here and this old-fashioned toilet were added a few years later. We are not sure of the exact date when they were added. And you can see here the slanting roof. So originally this was the slanting porch roof. So this was another add-on room, as was the next room where you can see the slanted roof. This is what we call Rebecca's sitting room. She would sit here often in the afternoon, look out the windows here at her garden, and work on her sewing. So we have all kinds of sewing things in here. We have an old foot pedal sewing machine. We even have a spinning wheel, and this little machine is called a yarn weasel. And if you've ever heard the nursery rhyme, Pop Goes the Weasel.
Yes, I have.
This is what they're talking about, this machine here. Not a furry little animal. That's what I thought until I came on the tour here at the Bailey House. But the only purpose of this machine is to measure out a skein of yarn. So you wrap your yarn there and you turn it, you're wrapping the yarn on, and did you hear the pop?
I did.
That was Pop Goes the Weasel. Okay, so then you take your yarn off and you have a skein of yarn. All right, and one other piece of her handiwork is shown here on the wall. This is a cross-stitch sampler she did in the year 1835. And it spells out, this is an acrostic poem, it spells out gospel here to go along with the poem that goes that way. And she signed it down here, Rebecca T. Frazier, and Wilmington, Ohio is where she lived. Frazier being her maiden name. Alrighty, on to the kitchen. All right, the star of the kitchen is the wood-burning stove. Now, this is a very old stove. It was not the original one that was in the house, but you can see it was made in Los Angeles, California in the year 1879, I believe. So you can imagine how hot this must have been in September, our hot summer months. You have to get this oven stoked up in the morning, and you kind of have to keep it going all day long because it's not a quick on-off thing like our stoves today, of course. But it was very versatile. You could burn wood, you could burn hay, you could burn grass, you could even burn pine cones. You could burn coal. So, anything you could find that was flammable, you could throw in there. Now, back in those days, you might buy a stove from the Amazon of the day, the Sears catalog.
Oh, yeah.
This particular one is from 1909. And we have a page from the catalog here. And you can see how much that stove might have cost back in the late 1800s or early 1900s.
It was cheap.
$17.50, but it wasn't cheap for the time. All right, now of course, women's work was quite difficult back in those days, pre-electricity. And a good example of that is our irons that had to be heated on the stove. They had a number of irons they would have on the stove, and she might have her ironing board set up right here, and she would be ironing all her clothes and her linens. And when she needed to exchange, she would put this one back on and grab another one. Now, one interesting gizmo I really like to show people is this thing on the wall here. And this is an early home fire extinguisher. It was called a Red Comet. And there's a special liquid inside that globe. You might be familiar with it. It's called carbon tetrachloride. It's actually kind of a dangerous chemical, but one of its properties is that it turns into gas very, very quickly at a very low temperature. So if we had a fire on the stove, you would pick this up out of the holder and you would throw it at the stove. The glass would break and the liquid would splash out. It would turn into gas like that, displace the oxygen, and put the fire out.
Wow.
All right, we have a pump here at their sink. They may or may not have had a pump. We're really not sure about that fact. But if you were lucky enough, you might have one of these pumps inside your home. And then you could have water for cooking, cleaning, etc. We already did the backyard, so you've seen their source of water. So the thing that we're not sure about is if they had a pipe running from the cistern to a pump, or if they just had to bring up water bucket by bucket from the cistern. Okay, this is a little pantry, and there's all kinds of kitchen gadgets in here that are kind of interesting. Of course, back in those days, everything was pretty much manually operated. So there had a lot of grinders for meat, for grains. This little machine, its only purpose is to push pits out of cherries.
Okay.
So you put your cherries in here, and then one falls down in there, and then this little rod pushes the pit out. So then you can make your cherry pie.
Good.
You can put it in your basket. This one could carry 2 pies, a double decker, and you could go to your church picnic. And we have some more laundry equipment here. Here's one of those ironing boards. This is a very simple washing machine. It's just a barrel that could be turned. And back in those days, people were still using washboards and wash basins quite a bit. And this little thing, which is not for beating bad children, but for beating dirty rugs.
Okay.
All right, we are down to the last room in the house. This is their spare bedroom, and again, you can see it was originally part of the porch. It was enclosed at some point. And it's decorated today as a children's room, even though their kids were full grown when they lived here. They did have grandkids come and stay with them at times, and this is the room that they would use. So you can see a variety of old dolls. We have a lot of old books. We have some old games over there. And if I could, I just want to show you one doll that's kind of unusual. This doll is called a topsy-turvy doll, and it's actually 2 dolls in one.
Oh, wow.
So you can see it has a black girl on one side and a white girl on the other side. This was invented during the Civil War, and there's a lot of interesting theories about how these dolls were used, both by black girls and by white girls. But they each have their own dress. Alrighty, now we've done the backyard, so we are just about at the end of the tour. You know what? I have one more story. Can I tell you one more story?
Absolutely.
Okay. It's something I forgot to tell you. We're going to go back to the living room here. Now, when we were on the side of the house out here, I was telling you to remember that area. And that's because of these trees that used to be on the side of the house. Now, they did something very specific with those trees that's fascinating. They had a son and daughter-in-law who lived in downtown LA. They were actually living in the Bailey's old house before they moved out here to Whittier. This is before they had a telegraph or a telephone. They had a way of instantly communicating with their relatives in downtown LA. At noon every day, if they needed help up here in Whittier, they would hang a white sheet in one of these trees. Every day at noon, their son and daughter-in-law in downtown LA would get out their spyglass and look up here to Whittier. If they saw the sheet in the tree, they would jump on their horses and ride up here to Whittier. So, I don't know. We've been told it's like 3.5 hours to ride your horse here from downtown LA. So 3 hours later, they would be here in Whittier to help their parents.
That's so cool.
Okay, that's about the end of my spiel.
Okay. Tracy, that was a fantastic tour of the Jonathan and Rebecca Bailey house in Whittier, California. So if anyone's looking for a great tour, you definitely want to come out here on Sundays between 1 to 4 p.m., correct?
That's right.
Good. Thank you so much for watching my video. Have a great day and come and visit. Take care and bye-bye. Thank you so much, Tracy.
You're very welcome.